This really shouldn't have taken so long to record, but I got a new phone, which is what I record on, and holidays, and then finals, and then I dyed my hair, and then excuses. I'm so sorry. But here is chapter 5 of the deployment notice. The tags and link will be in the description. Without further ado, let's get started. "Daddy! Buck! Wake up!" a voice called, and he felt little hands shake him awake. He opened his eyes groggily to see Christopher standing in front of him in his pajamas. Eddie groaned and shifted under him. Buck didn't remember falling asleep on the couch last night, but that must have been what happened. His head was on Eddie's chest, and Eddie's arm was thrown around his shoulders. The laptop was still open on the coffee table in front of them, screen black. "Good morning, buddy." Buck yawned, straightening up, or at least trying to. 5 more minutes. Eddie groaned, pulling Buck down. Clearly not quite awake yet. Buck laughed at that. "Come on, Chris. I think someone needs a little bit more help waking up." Chris just giggled at that and let himself fall into Eddie's lap. He then started tickling him, clearly understanding the assignment. Eddie thrashed at that, smacking Buck in the back of his head. "Hey!" he exclaimed, rubbing at the spot. And Chris lit up on the tickling. "What's going on?" Eddie asked. Buck tried not to be too disappointed when Eddie removed the arm from around his shoulders, now that he was awake, so he could rub his eyes. "It's time to get up," Buck replied, straightening up and stretching out his back. "Go take a shower, and Chris and I will make breakfast." "Pancakes!" Chris cheered as he got up and started making his way to the kitchen, and Buck got up to follow. "Wait, Buck, no!" Eddie called, grabbing his wrist to hold him there. "I'm not making you cook on your last day here." "You're not making me do anything. I offered," Buck replied. But seeing as Eddie wasn't letting it go, softened. "Please, Eddie, I want to. It might be the last time I get to for a while." Eddie seemed to accept that and let go of Buck's arm, letting him follow Chris into the kitchen, and got up to take a quick shower. "All right, Superman, you want to handle the mixing?" Buck said, picking him up and sitting him on the counter so he could reach easily. They ended up going to the beach, per Christopher's request. Buck had until 6 p.m. to leave for the airport, so they asked him to do what he wanted to do. Buck had been surprised at his request, but Eddie hadn't. "He only wants to go with you," Eddie had shrugged. "Plus, I think he associates the beach with saying goodbye." And hadn't that just broken his heart for the kid? He knew the beach had been the last place Shannon, Eddie, and Chris had been together. Plus, there'd been the whole tsunami. I'm saying that wrong. Debacle. He just wanted to scoop Chris up in his arms and promise that he wouldn't die. Wouldn't leave him forever. But he knew he couldn't do that on a normal day, given his line of work, much less right before deployment. So they laughed and played in the surf for a while, taking turns ganging up on each other for splash wars. It was a fun day, and now Eddie and Buck were relaxing on the sand while Christopher built a sandcastle a few feet away. He was really lucky, supposed. Flashing back to the other day, no one had ended up truly angry with him, despite the years of lies and omissions. There'd been a lot of curiosity and questions, sure, but no one had been angry or even seemed to think all that differently of him. Somehow he was still Buck to them. He's pretty sure some of them might just be willfully ignorant as to what exactly the true nature of a seal is, but for now he'd take it. Hopefully they'd never have to see any different. Eddie was not nearly as delusional as the rest of them. He'd been in the military himself, after all. He'd seen SEALs at work before. "What's got you thinking so hard over there?" Eddie's voice cut through his thoughts. Buck hummed noncommittally, But Eddie just stared at him, persistent, waiting for him to open up. Were you surprised? You're gonna have to be more specific, Eddie replied with a smirk from where he was relaxing, back on his elbows against the sand. When you found about my, Bug waved his hands around vaguely, past and stuff. He finished lamely. Holy shit, am I bad at talking about this? He thought frustratingly. At this point, Eddie's doing better than me. Jesus Christ. At first, yeah, I guess. But to be fair, I walked into your appointment after a mysterious and concerning phone call and was met with deployment papers on you in a bad shape, Eddie reasoned. Everything about that night was unprecedented and therefore surprising. Yeah, I suppose that's fair, he agreed, willing to let the response stand, even though that hadn't really been what he meant. He wanted to know if the seal still fit with the buck that Eddie knew, but he wasn't sure how to word that question. Now that I've thought about it, though, Eddie continued, having apparently read his mind, it checks out. A lot of things make more sense now, too. Like what? All the crazy and reckless saves? Buck chuckled and made air quotes around the words. Eddie laughed, too. Yeah, sure. I suppose that makes more sense, too. But I'd always wondered. He trailed off, eyes drifting towards Christopher, who was so focused on the high tower he was forming that his tongue was poking out. Buck watched them both as Chris stuck a seashell on the top of the tower and Eddie ran a finger over his St. Christopher medallion that rested against his chest. Then he looked back at Buck and seemed to remember the conversation they'd been in the middle of. You never asked, he said, at Buck's raised eyebrows. You're inherently a very curious person, but you never asked. Buck was about to ask what it was he hadn't asked about, but a look at Eddie's open expression gave him the answer. About the Silver Star? He asked anyways. About the Silver Star, Eddie confirmed. Buck nodded, thinking about how exactly to phrase his response to that. He hadn't asked because he'd understood. The Eddie he'd met years ago had looked like he was still in the middle of reintegrating. He looked haunted at times, and Buck wasn't going to be the one to poke at something that was probably one of the new guy's worst memories. The others hadn't understood, though, and he supposed that did make him stand out. If you joined the fire station maybe a year before you did, I might have said something. He started, having decided to go the funnier route in his response. I wouldn't have asked you about it, but I had my cocksure arrogant attitude going on at the time. Eddie just looked at him with a raised eyebrow and thinly concealed amusement. I'm pretty sure that you still had that going on by the time I met you. No, that was me feeling threatened, and I was a dick, but not the way that I would have been, he explained with a chuckle. If it had happened about a year ago, and you made the comment in the gym about us doing the same things, I just done it with the people shooting at me, Eddie finished with a grimace. Not exactly the least dramatic thing I've ever said. Eddie laughed at that. No, it wasn't, he agreed easily. But a year ago, I probably would have found a way to work into the conversation that you may have a Silver Star, but I have a Navy Cross. Eddie's eyes cut over to him sharply, seemed to consider him for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, of course you do. I don't even want to know the kind of fuck shit you had to pull as a SEAL to get an award for going above and beyond, do I? Buck laughed at that. No, you probably don't. But the point is that I didn't ask because I understood what it's like to be stuck in a shitty situation and then handed a piece of metal and told you deserve it when you don't feel like you do. Eddie just nodded at that. I still haven't learned to be okay with it yet. The yet made Buck smile a bit. It left the implication that Eddie thought he could maybe be okay with it someday. It meant Eddie had hope that a year ago he wouldn't have had. I haven't yet either, he grinned back at him, emphasizing the yet just a little bit. Let me know if you figure it out, yeah? Eddie chuckled and nodded his agreement to this sentiment. They lapsed into a comfortable silence while watching Chris adorn his castle with seashells. There was still one thing from the other day that had bothered him, though. Something he'd forgotten until just then. He supposed it was due to everything else going on that he'd forgotten it till just now. You're still thinking awfully hard over there. Eddie broke the silence again with the raised eyebrows directed at him. I think it's my fault, Buck sighed after a moment's contemplation. He'd be dead in a week, so why not be completely honest? The thing that Chim said. Eddie looked bewildered. Again, you're going to have to be more specific than that. Buck just sighed. Yesterday, before I told everyone, Chim asked if we were together yet, and if so, said that we'd want him a lot of money, implying that not only do several of our friends believe that we should be, or have already been in a romantic relationship, but also that there's a fairly large betting pool on us. Eddie just laughed. Are you surprised? They'll bet on anything, you know it. Besides, how many strangers have assumed we're together? Seriously, I think the whole PTA at Chris's school thinks we are, married or something. Which I would not be correcting them on. Those meetings are so much easier without the incent. English is a hard language, guys. Incent flirting. It was Buck's turn to laugh at the last comment, but Eddie continued. Is it really that shocking that our friends think we could be good Reader's note, it is too late for this and English is hard. I'm sorry, Back into the story. But Eddie continued. Is it really that shocking that our friends think we would be good as partners in more ways than we already are? No, it isn't. Buck agreed with a grin. Then why is it your fault? Eddie continued. Buck heaved a deep breath. Now or never, he thought to himself. Because I also might want us to be partners in more ways than one, Buck explained. And I figured maybe they'd pick up on the idea because I'd been too obvious about it. Eddie just stared at him. Buck's words apparently had not been what he'd been expecting in reply. Buck watched as he processed the new information. Then I guess it's my fault too. Eddie finally managed to get out. What are you saying, Eds? He asked, sitting up a bit. He needed to know precisely what Eddie was saying before he changed everything. I'm saying that I want that too. I want to be more than what we have been with you. Eddie was looking at him now, with his entire heart in his eyes, and Buck was so happy. But he also couldn't do this yet. Not like this. Not tinged with sadness and desperation as Buck left, and neither of them knew if he was coming back again. Eddie, I want that more than anything, but we can't right now, he said, and he watched Eddie's expressions shudder close and quickly continued. I love you. God, Eddie. You have to know that at least by now, but we can't start something just for me to leave. It isn't fair on either of us. All right? Eddie nodded, seeming to accept that answer. Though unable to hide his frustration and disappointment, Buck was having trouble stamping down on his own. He finally had what he wanted for years now, and he couldn't actually have it yet. Bucky! Daddy, come look at my sandcastle! Christopher exclaimed, and just like that, they were back to normal, oohing and awing over the slightest mishap pile of sand adorned with seashells. They stayed at the beach for another hour before it was time to go back to Buck's apartment, so they could have dinner and he could get ready to leave on time. Thank you for listening. Please comment if you have any recommendations, what you thought of the thing, what I can improve. Please be constructive. I'm so sorry this took me so long to get out. I got distracted. I'm going to be so honest. I got distracted. Please do come back. I will post chapter 6 much sooner. Okay? I'm so sorry.